Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gallop Out. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson. I'm not joined by my usual co-hosts, Jackson Muniz, Kaylee Shapiro. We're all busy as we get ramped up towards the Breeders' Cup coming next Friday, October 31st. And this is going to be the first of many Breeders' Cup Series videos that we have on this channel at the Gallop Out. And we are going to have a plethora of guests, and we're going to kick it off with someone who I'm very excited to finally have on the show. I got to meet him last year. Obviously, very familiar with him in his years prior to retiring when he was with DRF. But now he has a horse running in his namesake this Saturday up at Santa Anita. He's still very much involved in the horse racing world. I'm excited to dive into the history and his experience in the Breeders' Cup races. He's been covering them since 1984, but it is my guest, Jay Privman. Jay, welcome on. Thanks for having me, or thanks for joining me, as we dive into the Breeders' Cup.
My pleasure, Ryan. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So we spoke a little bit about, in the pre-show, and we'll just kick it off with your horse Privman running. Just what's it been like to have a horse, one, named after you, which is that's a lot of pressure to begin with, because, you really want that horse to run well. But for the horse to, progress along as he has, we've got to see him a couple times at Del Mar, and now he's running up at Santa Anita in a stake race. Yeah,
he's really come a long ways. He's kind of been a little bit immature, both physically and mentally, but he really started to put it together this summer at Del Mar when he won a maiden race, and then came back 20 days later and won a first level allowance. And then he got thrown into the deep end of the pool last time, and I thought acquitted himself pretty well in the Goodwood, finishing third. And now he's going to get a little class relief on Saturday in a minor stake at Santa Anita called the Tokyo City, which is a flat mile. It's the same distance at which he won the two races at Del Mar. So hopefully he can use that as a springboard to bigger and better things later this year and on into his 4-year-old year next year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We've all been a little immature physically and mentally at times, but it's all about how you progress and move on into the next day. So best of luck this Saturday as you have Privman running in the Tokyo City Stakes. And the following Saturday, of course, down at Del Mar is going to be the Breeders' Cup. So that's ultimately what we should talk about. You've been covering the Breeders' Cup pretty much every year. I think 1 year aside is the only year that you've missed. But you started, I believe, back in 1984, if I'm not mistaken. You weren't with DRF quite yet, but what was that first Breeders' Cup experience like for you?
Yeah, so 1984 was really a cool year for me. I was only 24 years old. I covered the Derby for the third time that year. I covered the Olympics in LA that summer, and then the very first Breeders' Cup at Hollywood Park that fall. And as you were just alluding to, Ryan, I've been at every Breeders' Cup except for the one at COVID that was run during at Keeneland, I should say, that was run during COVID. So otherwise, I'd have a perfect attendance record. The first Breeders' Cup was really exciting because honestly, you didn't really know what to expect. I mean, by now it's been run so many times that we kind of have a feel for how the day unfolds, and it's one big race after another and all the championship implications. But in 1984, while the theory and the hope was that it was going to decide championships on the racetrack with this big year-end event, you weren't sure it was going to play out that way. And you certainly didn't know how the day was going to unfold. But it was an exhilarating afternoon. There were only 7 races then. It was only a one-day event then. And it was a terrific event because you had a lot of horses that came over from Europe for the first time to run in that event. You had all the best horses shipping in from the East Coast, like Chief's Crown, who won the very first race, which was the juvenile on that card. And then, the final race of the day was that still talked about Breeders' Cup Classic with Wild Again, Gate Dancer, and Slew of Gold bouncing off each other coming to the wire. So it was a pretty memorable and significant afternoon of racing.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. You mentioned there were 7 races on the initial card. We now have 14 total over a 2-day span, with the Juvenile Day on Friday with 5 Grade 1 events for the Breeders' Cup, and then into Saturday, one of the biggest days. So that's, one way the Breeders' Cup has evolved throughout the years. And then you mentioned that first year, kind of feeling it out, seeing how, the day was exactly going to unfold. And you alluded to now we absolutely know kind of the way things progress in the Breeders' Cup. What's another kind of way you've seen the Breeders' Cup evolve as it's gone on?
Oh, I mean, it's just become this huge event, right? A 2-day kind of a festival. As you were mentioning, you've got the 5 races on Friday, which I think the Breeders' Cup is very smartly packaged as that Future Stars thing. You've got all the 2-year-old races on one card. So that's a really smart way, I think, of packaging that afternoon. And then you've come back with the 9 races for older horses on Saturday. So it's become a little bit more of an unwieldy thing to handicap and certainly to cover if you're working it as a journalist. But it's certainly still just a great event. There's just a lot more of it than there was back when it first started.
Yeah, I think that was yeah. There's certainly a lot more to it now, and yeah, they have grown into that popularity that's kind of come along with the successful racing. You mentioned that the only Breeders' Cup you missed was the one in 2020 at Keeneland. Do you have a most memorable one that stands out? A few. I've only been able to watch a few as I only got into the game about 2019. But I have my handful already, and I look to having more. So which one probably stands out the most to you?
I don't know that I could pick one. I mean, it's really because there's so many. There've been so many great moments over the years. I mean, obviously that first one really stands out as just a significant, memorable thing to see because nobody had seen it before. I would imagine it would be like somebody who was at the first Super Bowl or something like that. But that certainly stands out. The other ones though that were the high points, I think obviously Zenyatta winning the Breeders' Cup Classic in front of her adoring home crowd fans at Santa Anita in 2009 was certainly a memorable event and race. Going back 20 years before that, the final showdown between Sunday Silence and Easy Goer in the Classic at Gulfstream Park was an absolutely compelling race. The year before that, in '88, you had Personal Ensign completing an undefeated season by barely getting up in the final jump to beat Winning Colors in the distaff, and then a little bit after that, Ali Sheba won the Classic. So you had that. Was certainly one that stands out. And then more recently, certainly American Pharoah completing his Triple Crown win year with coming back after his loss in the Travers to win the Classic at Keeneland. And then the most recent one that was run at Keeneland was when Flightline completed his undefeated career with just a brilliant performance on the afternoon. And there've been, certainly others. I'm leaving out, I'm sure 25 that other people could come up with, but those are some of the ones that stand out for me.
Yeah, obviously in recent memory, Flightline is the one that stands out the most, especially for myself. That was just, it's not every day you get to see grade 1 horses just get embarrassed pretty much by another grade 1 horse. And for lack of a better word, that's pretty much what Flightline did. You mentioned American Pharoah completing the Grand Slam, I guess they called it, of the Triple Crown and the Breeders' Cup Classic. And then you went and took us back with Personal Ensign and Ali Sheba that year, winning the distaff in the Classic, and so much more. In terms of your career, so horse, aside from maybe the most memorable race, was there maybe a career-defining moment or career highlight that happened at a Breeders' Cup that you remember fondly?
Well, I mean, being able to cover the first one was certainly a thrill and an honor to be at, and having been at all of them but one has been great. But in terms of maybe from my time working and covering something, there's a few that kind of stand out. I mean, obviously being there for American Pharoah to complete his brilliant 3-year-old year and come back after his loss in the Travers and win the Classic was a significant race to cover. That Sunday Silence Easy Goer Classic at Gulfstream stands out. But I did some TV work over the years for ESPN and for NBC, and there were a couple of those that really stand out. When Zenyatta won the Classic at Santa Anita, my assignment, Ryan, was to interview John Sheriffs, win or lose. And John Sheriffs likes to watch races by himself. Kind of at Santa Anita, he would stand up the stretch about 100 yards before the finish line. And, he knew what I was going to be doing. And, the way I would work it is I would be near him, but not in the camera shot, because people don't want to see me react to how Zenyatta does. They want to see John Sheriffs react, right? I don't want to be in the shot, but I want to be close enough to him that once the race is over, win or lose, I can get to him fairly quickly. And it was just a great thrill to not only watch that finish of Zenyatta, but then to be able to get with John Sheriffs, walk with him down the stretch. You might remember, if you've seen the video, he tosses his hat into the crowd as he's walking down the outer rail on his way towards the winner's circle. And just that whole scene was an amazing thing to be part of. And then one that really kind of stands out that people might remember, in 2011, the Breeders' Cup at one point had gotten up to 15 races. They had a race called the Breeders' Cup Marathon. They don't run it anymore. But in 2011, there was an incident during the running of a race at which Calvin Burrell took exception to the tactics that Javier Castellano had used. And I'm working for ESPN. I'm standing by the winner's circle and the scale that the jockeys weigh out on after the race. And as Calvin comes back, he is just breathing fire, and he goes after Castellano, and a fight breaks out 10 yards from where I'm standing. And Joe Tessitore was the host for the show on ESPN then, and he saw what was happening on the camera, and they threw it down to me, and I'm just sort of trying to just describe this crazy scene that's unfolding. So that's certainly a memory. It was one of the more unusual things I've ever seen at the races in my years covering horse racing.
No doubt, that must have been quite a surprise for you to, especially to get it thrown to you, and then you're just watching a fight break out between two jockeys. But that's the kind of competitive fire that's there, and we see it in every other sport, and it happens when jockeys and athletes just care so much about what they're doing. And I probably would also take exception to it if I'm on the back of a horse going 40 miles an hour and someone does something maybe too dangerous for my liking. The John Sheriffs for the 2009 Breeders' Cup. I assume you got to watch him for the entire race, along with watching the Classic. What was it like seeing his emotions kind of unfold throughout? The break wasn't necessarily the quickest. Zenyatta was never quick out of there. She was so far back early, and then for her to make that usual run with one of the best race calls of all time.
So I wasn't really watching John watch the race because I need to watch the race, because I need to be able to interview him afterwards and be able to ask him, questions that are pertinent to whatever happened to Zenyatta during the running of the race. And obviously you don't know what's going to happen. And as you just pointed out, she broke poorly. She was well back, and then she made that incredible run to get up in time. So I didn't really, watch John during the race, but obviously I'm standing maybe 20 yards from him. As I'm standing facing the track, he was to my left, and the cameraman was between me and John. So the cameraman's getting the shots of John during the race, but I didn't really see how he reacted as the race unfolded. I certainly saw all of his emotion as soon as the race was over. And then I got to him when they came to me and interviewed him, and then walked with him, as I said, towards the winner's circle. It's funny, you talk about just one little other anecdote. I had the same assignment the next year when Zenyatta ran for what turned out to be her last race at Churchill Downs, the one race when she got beat by Blame. And I had the exact same assignment, follow John Sheriffs. And I again watched that race not far from him. And as you know, Zenyatta came up, just short of catching Blame in that race. And I remember looking at John. John knew what I was going to be doing, and our eyes just sort of caught each other when the race was over. And he didn't say a word. He just sort of gave me this look of like, "What are you going to do?" Like he was obviously disappointed, but he was proud of the performance she had put up and of her career. But it was just sort of like, "Oh my God, can you believe we came that close to pulling it off?"
Yeah, to lose it on the head bob like that by I think that was a nose, maybe a big flared nostril. Yeah, that must have been gut wrenching to say the least. So that probably was not one of the easier assignments you've had, is to go interview John Sheriffs immediately after that sort of emotional roller coaster.
He was great about it. I mean, that whole team with Zenyatta, between him and Mike Smith and the Mosses who owned her, I mean, they were very understanding of her significance to the racing world, and were always very open about sharing her with people. And John understands what our job is. And, one of the things that I benefited by of doing this all these years was having relationships with these people that were built up over years where they know you, they trust you. And I, from my standpoint, I know what they are comfortable with or not comfortable with. Like, do they want me to stand next to them during a race? Do they want me to talk to them as they're going to the post or not? Those kinds of things. You just sort of learn what people want or don't want, and you have to respect that, obviously. But when you do that, you end up having good relationships with people, and you get the information that you need, whether it's in a joyous moment like it was at Santa Anita, or after a really crushing loss like it was the next year at Churchill Downs.
Yeah, that was a really nice answer and well put. So thank you for elaborating on that, because you I'm sure had to walk that line and have a good balance between the professional and then kind of the personal, maybe emotional side of things as the race kind of unfolds. But as we stick with the Breeders' Cup topic for today, is there a horse that maybe best epitomizes the Breeders' Cup in your opinion? We just spoke on Zenyatta, and actually before I get to that question, this show, my co-host Jackson Muniz and my other co-host Kaylee Shapiro. Kaylee's from the East Coast, Jackson and I are from the West Coast. So to us, Zenyatta is the greatest female racehorse of all time to race in the U.S.
All time's a long time, by the way.
It is a long time. It's a very long time. And our East Coast co-host Kaylee Shapiro has her vote in the Rachel Alexandra camp.
You both might want to go back and watch Ruffian.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So is Ruffian your greatest filly or mare?
That's who I would put it. That obviously Rachel Alexandra and Zenyatta were sensational horses, but I think there might be a little recency bias there.
There certainly could be. You said, a long time or forever. All time is a long time.
Yeah.
That's good. We'll get to the question then. Is there a horse in your opinion that maybe epitomizes the Breeders' Cup, or a horse or a race that you think maybe put the Breeders' Cup, on the map in even a bigger way?
So I think to your first question, what horse or horses epitomize the Breeders' Cup? There's a few that come to mind. One of the great things about the Breeders' Cup was consistently getting top class European horses to extend their season and come over to the U.S. Normally, those horses would be done after something like the Arc or the mid-October races at Ascot. But with the Breeders' Cup, those horses kind of extend their season and come over here. And to me, one of the early horses that sort of epitomized it was Miesk, who was a mare who won the Breeders' Cup Mile grass race 2 years consecutively. And then more recently, taking it to even another level would have been Goldakova, who came over 4 times and won 3 in a row and was an unlucky loser trying to win for the 4th time in a row. And you could even extrapolate that, Ryan, to this year when you've got Rebels Romance, who's won the Turf twice previously and is going to try and be the first horse to win that specific race 3 times. There are other horses that have won 3 Breeders' Cup races, but not 3 Turfs. And Rebels Romance will try and do that. So those are the kinds of horses that, to me, epitomize what the Breeders' Cup is. And maybe from a domestic standpoint, I'd put an old favorite of mine in there, that being Kona Gold, who ran 5 times in the Breeders' Cup, won once, but kept coming back for more year after year. And that's really one of the cool things about the Breeders' Cup, is when you see a horse like that, an older gelding that can just keep coming back and competing at a high level for a number of years, which is kind of what Rebels Romance is doing right now.
Yeah, it really is. Rebels Romance is he set the record for the oldest horse to ever win the Breeders' Cup Turf last year. And then now he's coming right back to do it again. You could argue he's in the best vein of form in his career, at least the last couple years, because he has done nothing but dominate. He's danced every dance. And he's one of those horses that's kind of that old school war horse that has showed up every time on whatever continent, in whatever country he's in. And he always seems to run his A race. So I am really looking forward to him. He's won me over the past year. Going into the Breeders' Cup last year, I was like, now Rebels Romance, he's too old. There's no way he's going to get the job done again. There's so many good horses in here. And then since then, all he's done is win Grade 1 races or Group 1 races, depending on where he was running them. And he comes right back, and he's likely going to be the favorite, maybe split with Mini Hawk. But that'll be a conversation for a later show. But Rebels Romance is one of those horses I'm very much looking forward to on the weekend. Win or lose, I know he's going to give his best effort. And then you mentioned some really good and, repeated runners in Kona Gold and Goldakova, who obviously was fascinating to watch every time she came over to run in the mile. So those were all great answers. Those were all really good kind of trips down and through memory lane. I spent the past couple days just kind of going through old Breeders' Cup races, just because whether I wasn't alive yet or I wasn't following racing, it's always good to watch them. I think my personal I guess we'll go race call maybe as my next little fun question. There's obviously the Zenyatta one in 2009 with Trevor Denman's iconic call. Do you have a favorite of yours? Does one kind of stand out more than the rest? Doesn't have to be the classic; could be any of the races.
Yeah, I mean, for the classic, I think there's a couple of Tom Durkin's the year at Hollywood Park in '87 when Ferdinand just held off Ali Sheba, and he said the two Derby winners hit the wire together. Obviously, the year that Tisnow won it, only 7 weeks after the horrible 9/11 tragedy in New York. That was a memorable call. And then also another one of Durkin's that I thought was terrific was the year Cigar finished off his perfect 10 for 10 year, and he called him the unconquerable, unbeatable Cigar. Those are ones that stand out for me over the years. Obviously Trevor's call of Zenyatta is an all-timer.
Yeah, Trevor's call, of course, and then Tom Durkin, who is arguably the best race caller of all time as well, with the way he was able to tell those stories throughout the race, and he did it so well, and he has so many iconic lines to go along with it. Next question I have for you is something we always try and do in racing, whether it's yourself, me, racetracks, is we want to bring more fans into it. We want to attract younger fans to the game because you know the horse racing atmosphere better than anybody, but it's addictive. It's fun. It's one of the most entertaining, whether you're there to people watch, whether you're there for the races. There's nonstop action and excitement, especially on the biggest days. What do you think is something the Breeders' Cup could do to widen that reach to attract new fans to the game?
Yeah, I think the price point for entry to the Breeders' Cup has gotten too high, honestly. And if the market can support that, more power to the Breeders' Cup for being able to get that kind of a price and raise revenue and get people to enjoy a first-class experience at the price point that they charge. I'd like to see, though, another price point, let's use Del Mar as a hypothetical, where you could get into the infield, let's say, for a much lower price, because as you were just alluding to, I think getting people to see the event in person is the best sales job you can have for the Breeders' Cup. As great an event as it is to watch on television, and as good a job as the broadcasters do on television, to be able to see it in person is to me the best experience. And I'd like to see some different and more affordable price points for younger, newer fans to be able to have that experience.
I like that answer. I share a lot of it. I do think the price point is maybe a little too high. And I especially for whether it's the infield or just, general admission, I get if you have to charge an arm and a leg for seats or a suite or, a reserve table or anything like that. But I feel like, if you're there to just standing room only type of a situation and you just want to walk in the gate and be there, it should be affordable to everybody. And I think it is one of the easier sales job in the world because once you get in, I mean, the track kind of speaks for itself, does the work for itself, and you don't need to even say a word. Everything's going to kind of fall into place from there.
Right.
Thank you again, Jay, for joining me. We'll continue this on a few more questions. The Eclipse Awards, the Breeders' Cup is championship weekend. So it's where champions are made. However, that, at least in my opinion, I don't think it should diminish the body of work that a horse has done previous to, the Breeders' Cup weekend. But regardless, it is the best horses on the biggest day and on the biggest stage. How important, in your opinion, is the Breeders' Cup to shaping those year-end awards?
Well, I think you kind of framed it really well there. I think the Breeders' Cup is if not the most important, one of the most important. Obviously, the Triple Crown races are, but those are restricted races. Those are for 3-year-olds only. But in terms of a year-end championship event, the Breeders' Cup stands out. But I do think what you just alluded to, Ryan, is very important, and that's the body of work. And I could even think of a very recent example. I thought last year, for instance, Johannes would have been a very deserving winner of the male turf championship. And that's with all due respect for how great a horse Rebels Romance is. But I thought the body of work that Johannes had was overlooked because he had, one narrow defeat at the end of a long, productive year, and a horse who came over and ran one time got the award. So I think it's situational. I think when a horse comes over from Europe and there's really not a standout in the division, that's not an inappropriate way to go. And Rebels Romance is a world-class horse. But I thought, getting back to the way you framed the question, I do think the body of work should count for a lot. And in the specific case last year of Johannes, I thought voters missed that one.
Yeah, I don't entirely disagree with you. I know for last year, the point on Johannes is one that maybe I had initially forgot about until you just refreshed my memory. Rebels Romance, 1 or 2 races in the States, and then, the win on Breeders' Cup weekend was ultimately enough, while Johannes traveled the country and he, had multiple wins, and he just came up a little bit short in the mile. But last year's Horse of the Year winner, there was, I think, a pretty fierce debate between the two, no pun intended, between Fierceness and Sierra Leone, who are going to meet again next Saturday in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I don't know if you had an opinion on last year. I was a fan of Sierra Leone winning it, but the case for Fierceness was very evident, and I think they've both come on to have really productive 4-year-old years, and that's evident by both of them being in the Classic. Did you have a thought or opinion on which one of those should have won Horse of the Year last year? And then I'll kind of transition that into this year's question.
Well, I mean, you're leaving out the horse who did win, and that's Torpedo Anna. So, in terms of the 3-year-old Eclipse Award, if that's the question you're actually asking me. So for Horse of the Year, then it's got to be basically a 3-way question, right?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding that you're referring to Horse of the Year as opposed to 3-year-old male.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. That's no. It's just you hadn't. So anyway, let's move on. So I thought, Sierra Leone deserved it, but I had no problem with anybody who voted for Torpedo Anna based on how well she had run in defeat in the Travers, finishing in front of Sierra Leone. To me, there's a logical way to come up with her as your Horse of the Year using that criteria. I just thought that, going back to something you alluded to in an earlier question, body of work, I thought Sierra Leone's, in terms of the quality of the races that he ran in for the totality of the year, made him a slightly better choice than Torpedo Anna. And so for me, I voted last year for Sierra Leone, but I can't argue with people who went the other way, because to me, it was not a clear-cut, obvious decision. I just preferred Sierra Leone.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the opinion between those three horses, I think you could split that either way. I like your reasoning, and thank you for reminding me that it was a 3-parted question, where it wasn't just focused on Sierra and Fierceness. There was also the filly who ended up winning that race. Going into this year's Breeders' Cup Classic, 2-part question. One, we'll stick on the championship theme. One, is this the most loaded top to bottom Breeders' Cup Classic field that you can remember in terms of competition? And then do you think the 2025 Horse of the Year will be in this race, or will it maybe be a runner that is not in the Breeders' Cup Classic, maybe in another division?
So to your first question, there's 2 classics that to me are at the top of the table. Everybody always refers to the 1998 Classic as being the best one ever, and it was terrific. But the field in 2004 at Lone Star Park had a brilliant field top to bottom in terms of the quality of older horses, of 3-year-olds, and what they had accomplished. And encourage your viewers to look up the chart of that race to see how good that one was as well. This year's race is right up there as well. It's if it holds together, and here we are talking more than a week out, and hopefully it will. It has the potential to be the best one ever in terms, because you've got a returning Classic winner, the returning runner-up. The runner-up already won the Pacific Classic earlier this year over this track. Oh, by the way, you've got a horse who's just run off the Derby, the Belmont, the Jim Dandy, and the Travers in his last 4 starts in Sovereignty. When you've got a horse as good as Journalism looking at being no better than the 4th choice in the race, I think that tells you the depth of quality of this field. And then you throw in horses like Mindframe and the rest. It's really a sensational field. To the second part of your question, will the horse of the year be in the race? I would say yes, because as far as I'm concerned, every top contender for horse of the year, far and away at this point, led by Sovereignty, is in the race. And even if Sovereignty were to lose, I still think there might be a strong case for him to be horse of the year. So to your point of will the winner of horse of the year be in the Classic? I would say yes, because it's probably going to be either Sovereignty or somebody who beats him, right? And they're all in the same race.
Yeah, no, they are all in the same race. That's an excellent point. And I am curious if maybe the case for Sovereignty is already, almost open and shut. If he were to still, show up, even if he were to get beat in the Classic, he certainly has the body of work that would lend itself to a horse of the year title. And if he goes on to beat Olders, he's immediately in one of the, the greater horses and one of the best 3-year-old seasons we've seen for him to, accomplish what he has accomplished. We'll backtrack a little bit. We'll go to kind of the scheduling in the event format of the Breeders' Cup. It started off one day, 7 races. Then it went into the 2-day, 14-day kind of spectacle event that we have now. Is there anything that you would maybe want to change about the way that it's scheduled or about the event format in general?
No, I mean, it was originally 7. Then it was an 8-race 1-day event for briefly, because the first race that was added to the original 7 was the Filly and Mare turf race. But they kept that as just a 1-day event, and then it expanded out to a wider 2-day event. There's really nothing I would do differently now. I wouldn't want to expand it any more than it is. I think it's kind of at capacity for the numbers of races and the levels. Maybe you could make an argument that there could be some contraction. I know the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile oftentimes comes up as a weak race because you're taking horses who maybe could shorten up and run in the sprint or stretch out and run in the Classic, and you give them another option. But each year is different. And, this year the Dirt Mile is a terrific race. You just never know how it's going to come up. So I don't know that I'd want to necessarily eliminate that. And I really wouldn't want to eliminate it when it can be run around one turn, because I think a 1-turn Dirt Mile is one of the best races you can watch in North America. To me, the Met Mile, when it's run at Belmont Park, is one of the best races of the year.
I completely agree with that. The 1-turn, Met Mile, the 1-turn mile in general is such a uniquely run race where it's, kind of that sprint 1 turn, but it is still the full 8 furlongs. So I'm excited that in 2028, we'll get back out to Belmont Park and we'll get to see the 1-turn Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile around the 1 turn at Big Sandy once it's completed. Thank you for answering all those questions. That was fantastic. And thank you again for joining us here. I would love to talk about this year's Breeders' Cup Classic and just go into the field really quick. We'll scroll through the field as I'll throw the past performances up. We don't have to talk about every horse, but we'll start with kind of the big 3. Actually, I just happened to scroll to this horse. Contrary Thinking is a bit of a unique, kind of a big talking point, I would say, on horse racing Twitter right now, because this is kind of the rabbit that Chad Brown has supplemented into the race to be, some added speed to obviously help Sierra Leone. Got into a bit of trouble last time out in the Jockey Club Gold Cup when, there was just some crossing over in the beginning. And I'm not saying that was the fault of Contrary Thinking, and that's kind of a separate topic altogether. What are your thoughts on this kind of new rabbit idea that's being implemented here in a dirt race? Obviously, we see it a lot overseas in the grass races, but this is one of the first times of recent memory a purposeful rabbit has been entered.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it at all. I think if someone wants to put up a horse like this to be a pacemaker, obviously it's the connections of Sierra Leone who are the ones most desirous of having a horse like this in the race. I think the connections of Fierceness seem to be the ones who are the most potentially out of sort over this horse being in there. But the Fierceness of maybe a year or two ago and the Fiercest of now, to me, are different horses. We saw that Fierceness in the Pacific Classic is not a one-dimensional horse anymore. Mm-hmm. And to me, if Fierceness has matured to the horse that I think he has, then Contrary Thinking should just be a horse that is ignored by the connections of Fierceness in terms of the way the race unfolds, because he can sit off of them and still go on and run to his best ability. But I don't have a problem with a horse like this being in the race. I really don't. He's not. This isn't like a situation with. And I saw some people trying to compare this to Rick's Natural Star, who is this hopelessly outclassed long shot. It wasn't even a pacemaker. He was just a horse that was entered in the Breeders' Cup turf at when it was run at Woodbine back in '96. There's no comparison. It's a complete apples and oranges comparison to compare Contrary Thinking to a horse like Rick's Natural Star. So I don't have a problem with it. To me, it's fair game for him to be in the race.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, with it not being a full field of, I think 14 is the max, that, if you're going to supplement an entry, I think that's completely fine. And I don't think the idea of a rabbit is at all should be looked at as a negative idea by any means. And we touched on Fierceness, who, he has proved he's a different animal, and he might even be a better horse at Del Mar. Two of his strongest races have come over this racetrack. That Pacific Classic was extraordinary to watch because, the Fierceness of old, the Fierceness that I certainly thought he was, proved me wrong that day, because he came out and he, did not have things his own way. He was between horses. He was kind of shuffled on the inside, and he drew away from that field and journalism to win basically by as much as he wanted. He did that very well within himself, and now he'll get to come right back at Del Mar, where he is 2 for 2 in the exacta with a win and the second in last year's Breeders' Cup, which, again, that race in the Breeders' Cup last year, you could argue that was the strongest race that any 3-year-old ran all year. He set the fractions, pressed the pace the entire way, and still managed to hold on for second, holding off good horses like the one we'll talk about next, and that's Forever Young, who just started off his 4-year-old campaign just a few weeks ago on October 1st. Came back the right way. This was always the plan. Start him off here, bring him over for the Breeders' Cup. This is a horse that obviously always fires his best effort. He was a very close third in the Kentucky Derby. He was a late running third in last year's Breeders' Cup Classic. What do you make of his chances coming over to try the Classic one more time?
Yeah, I think he's got a terrific chance. He ran well here in the Classic last year behind Sierra Leone and Fierceness. He's now a year older. They gave him a nice spell. He ran earlier this year as a 4-year-old, and then they gave him a nice break to obviously point for the Classic, and he got a nice prep race in back in Japan most recently. And as we've seen in recent years, Japanese runners can go anywhere in the world and be effective. So he's another major player in what, as we were describing earlier, is shaping up as, if not the best Classic of all time, one of the best. And I think when it's said and done, if this field holds together, I think you could legitimately argue that this is the best Classic field there's ever been.
I certainly wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, the next horse we have to talk about is a 3-time grade winner this year, won a Classic race in the Preakness, won the Haskell Stakes, finished second in the Pacific Classic against Older and against Fierceness, second in the Belmont, second in the Kentucky Derby, both behind Sovereignty, of course, so we'll get to. And that's Journalism. This is his home track, so he finally gets to maybe turn the tables on Sovereignty a little bit. Journalism's traveled out east pretty much the entire year to face, the best of the best. Danced every dance, and you have to tip your cap to that. And he's done a really good job of it. He always fires his best race. The question I have for you is going to pertain to the jockey change that was just announced with Jose Ortiz taking over for Umberto Rispoli. What are your just general thoughts on that move?
It's obviously unfortunate for Umberto, who got the biggest win of his career on this horse in the Preakness. But, Jose Ortiz is having perhaps an Eclipse Award winning year. And the opportunity came to use him. I feel bad for Umberto that this happened, but I understand the decision made by the connections of journalism to use a rider of Jose Ortiz's talents. And one thing that hasn't been brought up yet that I've been surprised hasn't been alluded to, Eclipse Thoroughbreds owns a major portion of journalism in this partnership. And they won the Belmont Stakes about almost 10 years ago now with Creator in a partnership. Creator's trained by Steve Asbius, and Jose Ortiz rode Creator for them. So they've got a little bit of a history through that association of winning a major race with him. That little nugget has not really been brought up. The Jose Ortiz connection with Creator, and I think it's a significant aspect to this. Like I said, I feel bad for Umberto, but this is the biggest race journalism will ever run in outside of the Derby. It's certainly the richest race he's ever going to run in. And Jose Ortiz, who I think many could argue is having the best year of anyone in the country, was open. So I understand the reasoning behind this.
I think that was an excellent point to bring up just the history that they have going back to Creator in one of the biggest races. On top of that, the horse right, underneath, this is in alphabetical order, of course, is Locked, to which Eclipse also owns, the majority of, I believe. And Jose was a regular rider here. So they clearly still have that working relationship as well of Jose Ortiz. And I think, as tough of it is for Umberto, I know that you probably know him much better than I do, but he's very fiery. I'm sure this is just going to be added motivation, as we keep going into next season. So I know it's obviously must be, pretty shaking news, I would imagine, to be taken off. But I think that was an excellent point to bring up, that there is a lot of history here with Eclipse Thoroughbreds and Jose Ortiz. Locked, we kind of mentioned. It feels foolish it feels a little silly that we're skimming through Locked, a horse of his caliber who's been very good. He's run 3 triple-digit buyers, and you could argue his big cap. If he repeats that effort at Del Mar, he's probably going to be in the trifecta, maybe even on top, and the whole thing. But it's such a deep field that recency maybe just lends itself to too many questions. You have this horse, Mindframe. I'm not sure if you have any quick thoughts on him, but obviously jeopardized big time last time in the Jockey Club Gold Cup when unseating Irad Ortiz due to that incident with a couple horses coming over. Do you have any thoughts on Mindframe? He's one of 2 Rapoli, or one of 3, Rapoli and Todd Pletcher entrants?
Yeah, I think Pletcher's going to end up with 4 in the race, right? Because he's got Antiquarian. Rapoli's got the 2, Mindframe and obviously his homebred Fierceness. Mindframe is a top class horse. My biggest concern with him, Ryan, is that I'm not sure 1.25 miles is his optimum distance. I think he's more of a mile to 1.125 miles type, and I just think that extra furlong might just be a little beyond his sweet spot. I have great respect for him. I think he's a terrifically talented horse. I just wonder if 1.25 miles against this deep a field is gonna flatter him.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think you're not taking anything away from how talented of a horse he is, but it's going to be tough to if 1.25 miles is not your best distance, you're going against some runners where 1.25 miles is their best distance. So right. If you're not meeting other people at their strength, that could be tough. And I'm with you. I do think 9 furlongs maybe hits him between the eyes a little better than maybe the 1.25 miles, but he's very talented. And his last effort in the 1.25 miles in the Grade 1 Belmont Stakes last year, he was still a little immature. He was a bit of a head case, but he lost to Dornoch, who was a very good horse last year in his own right. So he came right back to win the Haskell, and he ran that 101. So maybe he's got more in him. Nevada Beach for Bob Baffert, winner of the Goodwood. We spoke about this on the pre-show. You kind of got the free ticket, so you have to take it.
Exactly. You get a free roll. It's obviously a big step up from the horses he beat, last time, especially that third place finisher of the Goodwood, who's a really, really, really good horse.
Yes.
But but yeah, it's going to be a pretty big step up for Nevada Beach. But look, you get a free roll, so why not, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. If you get a free roll at something, you got to take it. And I'm happy they're seizing that chance. And yes, the third place finisher in the Goodwood is arguably the best horse not in this field.
Exactly.
Next couple that we'll talk about are going to be two of your top three choices in the betting. First, Sierra Leone. We mentioned the rabbit that's been entered in contrary thinking to infuse some more pace. Into here. I'm always kind of on the side of at 1.25 miles. I feel like the pace is always going to be there. I'm not sure what your thoughts are. I thought the ride Flavien Prat gave in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year was one of the best rides ever, just because he made the move when you have to. He had the lead turning for home, and at Del Mar, with the stretch only being about 920 feet, you have to make that move early. Typically, the horse that's leading coming for home and at the 8th pole typically wins that race. So what are your thoughts on Sierra Leone, both in the pace scenario now with the added rabbit, and if he can, continue that dominance he showed here at Del Mar last year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he wants some pace to run into. He got a white hot pace last year. I mean, the pace last year was crazy fast. It would be hard to imagine it being anywhere close to that. But you don't. The one thing I think they don't want to see is a 1/2 mile and 48. It's not going to be 44 and change or whatever it was last year. But I think if you could get 46 and change to 47, that at least is a legitimate pace as opposed to something where it's really backed up and potentially compromising him. I thought he ran a sneaky good race last time. I mean, he was really impacted by the kerfuffle at the start of that race.
Yeah,
he went right over top of Irad Ortiz when he fell off of his horse, and Pratt understandably was concerned for Irad and looked back and wasn't going forward full bore with Sierra Leone initially after that, because how could he? He was concerned for a rider who he had just gone over. So I don't think Sierra Leone got his best chance certainly last time, and I thought still ran a respectable race. And he's been able to train straight into this coming out of that. So I would expect him to run as well as he did last year. The question will be, is that going to be good enough against this field, which could be better top to bottom than last year's was?
Yeah, I do think top to bottom, we've talked about it's one of assuming it holds together the way that it does, and we obviously both hope it does, it's going to be one of the best, if not the best, Breeders' Cup Classic field if we get all these runners. And it's going to be highlighted by the last horse we'll talk about in this field. That's Sovereignty. He has done absolutely nothing wrong as a 3-year-old. He won the Kentucky Derby. He won the Belmont. He prepped in the Jim Dandy, obviously a win. And then he came back to blow the doors off of a maybe not the strongest Travers field, but he won doing it the right way. 2 minutes and change, won by 10 lengths. Obviously a deserving favorite. Question for you that'll be betting related. Is this a horse that you might want to try and beat as a 3-year-old facing Olders for the first time? Or is this kind of just that dominant horse that you think, has the ability to beat Olders on the first try on the biggest stage?
I mean, both can be true, right? I mean, he might be a poor price, but he just might be so good that he's going to win anyway. It is, he's going to be a price that's probably not going to be something that I would find acceptable considering the depth of this field, but it might not matter because he just might be so good that he wins regardless. So, both of the things that you brought up could be true at the same time. He could be an unattractive price, and yet he could still be the best horse in here, even though he's running against Older for the first time. I have immense respect for him. He's had a tremendous year. He looks the part. He's a big, gorgeous, strong horse, and he's been campaigned in a way to maximize his performances. They skipped the Preakness after the Derby and ended up with a campaign that just kept him at Saratoga for basically 5 straight months, from the time of the Derby until he shipped out here to Del Mar just the other day. And then he worked in the Belmont Stakes and then the Jim Dandy and the Travers while never having to ship anywhere. And that, I think, allowed him to just develop physically. And certainly we've seen just 3 terrific performances out of him. And now he's been able to train straight into this race. And Bill Mott is obviously a world-class trainer and has won multiple Breeders' Cup races, including the Classic. And I think you'll see he's won the Classic a couple of times with Cigar and Drosselmeyer. So I think you're going to see another tremendous performance from Sovereignty in the Classic.
I definitely think so too, and I think we're in line for a fantastic showdown in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And you mentioned Sovereignty had the whole summer at his home base to kind of grow and mature, and didn't have to take worry about traveling or getting that taken out of him. Jay, thank you again for joining me. I got to ask one more because we did talk about Sovereignty, and then you mentioned that he skipped the Preakness. And a question during the Triple Crown season was the spacing of these races. And, maybe we don't see the best horses running all 3 because of the spacing anymore. But the argument could be made that, the best horses are still able to run in those 3. What do you make, if anything, of the decision for the Connections of Sovereignty to skip the Preakness? And they clearly had this whole campaign planned out as things kind of unfolded.
Yeah, so I think what you just alluded to there is an extremely important point to make in the specific instance of Sovereignty. If the Preakness was 2 weeks after the Derby, which it was this year, or 4 weeks or 8 weeks, Sovereignty wasn't running in that race. It doesn't matter when they ran that race. It was never part of the plan for this horse. Plan for this horse after the Derby, win or lose, was to go to Saratoga and stay there for 5 months and run in the Belmont, the Jim Dandy, and the Travers. So in this specific instance, that was what his connections wanted to do. It's too bad that he didn't get a chance to win the Triple Crown, but that's not what was important to them. They thought that it was best for Sovereignty to have the campaign that he ended up having. Then to the other part of your question about the spacing of the Triple Crown, I think a lot of reaction to the Triple Crown spacing suffers from recency bias. And this year, there were a lot of people saying, oh, we need to stretch these races out because, look, Sovereignty didn't run. But Sovereignty wasn't going to run whenever you ran those races. So to use him as an excuse to alter the spacing of the Triple Crown, to me, is a foolish and unwise evaluation of the totality of the situation. It's only been 10 years now since American Pharoah won it. It's only been 7 years since Justify won it. It's an achievable goal, an achievable thing for a horse to pull off. And the fact that it's happened twice in the last 11 runnings of the Triple Crown, to me, to throw that out and not consider the totality of the situation is foolish. And, obviously I've got more gray hair than I had when I started in this business 40 some odd years ago, but I'm of the leave it alone school.
I share your same views on that. I do think I think a lot of us suffer from recency bias, whether it's racing or any other sport that you pay attention to, or just life in general. I think recency plays a huge role, and we maybe get caught up in that. And I mean, even this year, you saw a horse like Journalism run in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. He was able to dance all those dances. He continued on, obviously, with the Haskell and then the Pacific Classic, but he ran in those that 7-week span, running in those 3 Triple Crown races, never finishing worse than second, obviously, when he lost to Sovereignty in the 2, and then he won the middle jewel of that Triple Crown. So it is doable. It is achievable. And those horses are still around that, go to all those big races and dance every dance and try and push themselves for the Triple Crown.
We just one last point to just sort of elaborate on what you just brought up, Brian. Sovereignty, I think we acknowledge, is a really special horse in terms of what he's accomplished. You take him out of the equation, and Journalism's a Triple Crown winner, and we're not even having this conversation. So, Journalism, he's just not as good as Sovereignty was in the Derby and the Belmont. Maybe at Del Mar, he will be better than him. We're gonna find out in a little more than a week. But to the point that you were just making, Journalism ran in all 3 races. He ran terrifically in all 3 races, so it can be done. And I think the Triple Crown should not be easy. It should be something that we appreciate for the specialness of it. And I think when, for instance, American Pharoah won it, if the Triple Crown spacing had been adjusted prior to him winning it, we would have never known if he could have pulled it off in the schedule that we have of 3 weeks or 3 races in 5 weeks. It would have been unknown. But we know, right? We know that he could do it. We know that Justify could do it. So it can be done. And we know that horses can run in all 3, like Journalism did this year, and perform well in all 3. So I'm fine with it being right where it is, as it is now and has been for the last 50 years.
Yeah. We could probably talk about this for the next 6 hours. I'll try and wrap it up. But the point you brought up of, if we did adjust the schedule and there is a Triple Crown winner, everybody is going to ask the question, well, what if it was run on the traditional schedule? So I think just keeping it the same, because we still see those horses do it at a high level, and it's supposed to be hard. It's not supposed to be something we see, every 2 years, every year there. I think it would lose that, authenticity of how hard it is if we saw, a horse that was going into the Belmont every year, having won the previous 2 races and, competing for this Triple Crown. Like, I think that the fact that it comes around so few and far between is part of what makes it special. So I'm on your side. I think the racing schedule should stay the same for the Triple Crown. And I think, you mentioned Journalism just kind of ran into a buzzsaw of a horse this year. Otherwise, we would have a Triple Crown winner, because he's run so well in every race. He has run that winning race. He's just faced a horse that is just, a step above him in terms of talent. But there's no step above you in terms of talent, Jay. So thank you for giving us all about an hour of your time. I really loved going through the history of racing with you and your experience at the Breeders' Cup, and then culminating here in the 2025 Breeders' Cup Classic, which hopefully is one of the best we've ever seen. It certainly looks that way on paper. Good luck this weekend, of course, up at Santa Anita. And then I look forward to seeing you next week down at Del Mar, and hopefully for the entire fall season as well.
I'll look forward to seeing you out there. And Ryan, I appreciate you having me on to do this.
Thank you so much. For everybody that tuned in to watch, thanks so much. We'll be back tomorrow with Emmett Kennedy of the Final Furlong Racing Pod to go over all the European shippers coming in and touch on all of their chances and potential in this year's Breeders' Cup. But for today, I've been your host, Ryan Anderson. This has been Jay Privman, my special guest, joining me as we went through the Breeders' Cup history and this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. Everybody have a good one, and I will see you guys tomorrow.